So just to give everyone a little background on the space that we're in, this is the space, has several names. It's been called iPaaS, integration, middleware, you name it. We're connecting software together. And if you look along the green line, you can kind of see some of the main players. So 20 years ago, companies like Tipco and Informatica got started. And these were primarily sold as on-premise solutions to IT. And as you can imagine, if you're familiar with that software, it's big, heavy, big infrastructure projects. You're talking some of the most expensive software you're going to buy and long deployments. And so as software developed, cloud started becoming a little bit more mainstream. Companies like Boomi and MuleSoft disrupted that market. This about 10 years later, and still kind of selling to the same people. These platforms are also around today, pretty heavy, requires pretty specialized engineering to get these in place. And if you fast forward to the last 10 years, there's just been a huge proliferation of SaaS companies. And there's a big move away from going to like your platform where you get your marketing, your sales, and your support all from the same vendor. People are now going to very specialized vendors, and there's industries popping up all over the place. And with this model, when you're picking all these specialists, you need to be able to integrate all these platforms. And when you're going after these niche software vendors, there's not always integrations out of the box, or not everyone's going to build them, or whereas they might be built for these larger platform players. So that's really where a platform like Tray comes into play. But one thing that's really unique about us is we're not sacrificing kind of like the power or scale on the back end, but we're making a very flexible and easy interface to work out of. So you don't have to be an engineer to operate on our platform. And what goes along with kind of the speed is the tools that require a lot of changes frequently. So kind of like the back in the day, you're like thinking of the Informaticas, they're just kind of connecting your ERP to your larger backend systems. But today we're talking within sales, we might have 100 tools we're using. Marketing might have 200 different platforms, depending on the size of the company. And week over week, monthly, strategies change, and you need your integrations to be able to move at that same speed of your business. And that's where the market's really hasn't really come to until a platform like ours. These are the type of tools that we're talking about. So sales is using enrichment tools as part of their CRM. So all new information is coming as getting enriched and then automatically put into a marketing campaign for that sales rep. So the sales rep is only responding to people who are coming back as hand raisers. And then you can pull in your different marketing, your communication channels across the company. You just have a lot more flexibility for what you can do. Now that integration is so much easier and quicker. And so I like to spend just a second or two on this slide because there's a lot of use cases on here. And these are use cases that might not normally come from integration because integration is typically more difficult. You got to pull in specialized resources. But if it's a platform that can be as easy to use as Excel, you can get a lot more ideas popping out of it. So what I like to think about is like swag automation. That's something that wouldn't really be a high priority, but now that you have a tool that you can work with a lot more agility, you can really start pulling automation to a lot of different places. How do we do this? Kind of the components of our platform. You'll see inside, we have these little circular nodes. Those are called connectors. We'll get into that, and Andrew will kind of give a little explanation during the demo. But connectors are basically little wrappers around all the API endpoints of different platforms. And so APIs control all the different things that you do inside a system. So think of Tray as just like a remote outside of these platforms that we're manipulating all the different systems through these connectors. Since connectors are so important to our business, we have an internal system called Connector Press. So we're able to build out these connectors in really fast SLAs. Depending on the plan level, we have different time frames, but typically 2 to 4 weeks is the general time we'll have a new connector up and running. And we also have a very powerful universal connector, so we can virtually connect to any platform that's out there from like a testing standpoint. In a lot of cases, use it in production. And CSV is just another way we're able to connect to so many different platforms. So if you need your data moved to another system, really you want to think about Tray. This is a platform that can really get your data wherever you need it to go or pull it from any other place. So the fact that we have so much flexibility, we can move so quickly and go across so many different use cases. We've attracted a lot of first movers and a lot of big logos kind of across the board. We have really fast growing companies on this list. companies that just went public like Lyft, Fortune 500s like SAP and IBM, companies like Outreach and Segment that are part of the unicorn club. So some of the fast moving companies that are attracted, and you can really see, just like the previous slide, across marketing, sales, support, ops, IT, the use cases are really endless. And a lot of these companies are using us, for example, like Outreach and Segment, across multiple different teams and multiple different segments of their company. So I just wanted to kind of go into a customer story, because this is actually something that we wanted to touch on today. We always like to focus on something different in these demos. And specifically, Andrew Steele was someone who kind of helped build this for our customer, Udemy. Think of it as you're connecting Stripe, how you collect billing information from your customers in an automated fashion. Before there's an automation, there wasn't an integration between these two platforms. Udemy was actually having an SDR team spending hours, non-revenue work, to just fulfill these transactions. Automating with a platform like Tray, they're able to move much quicker. And so this is something that we're going to kind of focus on today in the group demo. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew Steele. He's going to just give a quick little intro of the platform for everyone who's new on the line, and people who have been here before. You'll see the more deep dive into kind of Stripe billing as how it will work with your CRM.
Thanks, Cal. Here we are at the Tray.io homepage. As you can see, I have a bunch of workflows here, but a few things that you can do to enable yourself are, we have a library that has pre-built templates for different integrations. And so you're able to quickly see and learn what certain integrations look like on the Tray.io platform. And it's really helpful in learning the platform and how it works. A couple other things are, we have a People's tab where you're able to invite different members of your team so you can collaborate and build out integrations together. Now, this is really useful because Tray isn't a bill per seat tool. It's based on usage. So as you figure out different use cases for your team, you're able to invite different members, different team members, and continue to build out your integrations together. Now, if I go back to the home page, we can start digging in and build a real workflow. So before we dig in, I just want to recap the use case that Kyle mentioned, where Udemy basically has a self-service model where their customers can go sign up for a Udemy license without directly interacting with the sales team. Now, the gap that they had was that they had all these customers pouring in, where if they reached a certain threshold of how much they were spending, that's a point where they wanted to potentially move them to a more enterprise plan. And so what they had was they had to manually go into their Stripe account and look for licenses or payments coming in that hit a certain value threshold. Now with Tray, though, that process is completely automated, where they can create leads within Salesforce automatically if a certain payment threshold has been reached. And so back to Tray, I can show you exactly how this can look like within the Tray platform. So if I go ahead and create a new workflow, let me name Stripe to Salesforce.com. And once I create workflow, I'm brought to the first step in building out an integration. And that's defining what the trigger is. And what this trigger is basically what is the event that activates the workflow. Now, as you can see here, we have a bunch of service triggers here, but also a bunch of non-service specific connectors as well. So as you're building out workflows and you want to test functionality on the fly, you could choose something like the manual trigger. Another example of a non-service connector is the schedule trigger, where if you have a daily job that needs to run once a day or once a week, you can have this scheduled trigger to define exactly what point in the day or what time in the week that you want this to run, and it'll run on a scheduled basis. Now, for these service-specific connectors, these actually leverage webhook technologies from these services. And what that means is basically that service will fire off a real-time event when a certain action is taking place on the platform. And so for this use case, we want to leverage Stripe's trigger. And as you can see here, we have a Stripe connector. And immediately, once you pick the trigger, you're brought to the workflow canvas. And this is where you're able to build out the business logic behind your integration. So if I click on this connector here, I'm able to start configuring it. So normally I would select an authentication and register your particular Stripe account. I don't actually have a Stripe account, so I can't authenticate. But what I can do is define the event that I want this workflow to trigger off of. So in this case, I want this workflow to run every time a new subscription is created within Stripe. So whenever we have a new customer come in through Stripe. So I can search subscriptions and I can pick subscription created. Now, once I've have this information coming in, I can now start to retrieve information about this event and then start acting on that information. So if I go to the right-hand side, I can bring over another step in our workflow to start building out the business logic. And I just simply drag and drop it onto the canvas. And again, I have this list of operations that I have available. These are really the events that, or the operations that the API allows their users to do. And so if I go here, I want to get that subscription data from this new subscription that just came in. So I would, again, choose my authentication. And then I want to retrieve the subscription ID of the subscription that was just created. So I can go ahead and reference a previous step in the workflow to grab this particular ID. And as you can see, Trey makes it really simple to find the right information from previous steps in the workflow. So once I've picked that, I'm able to actually act on this particular subscription data. And so in Udemy's case, they want to create a lead within Salesforce if a subscription comes in that has a value greater than, let's say, $500. So I need to build the business logic. And here, Trey gives a rich set of operations that you can evaluate the data with. So here on the left-hand side, you can see some of these operations that are available, such as the Boolean condition, where you can set up a particular condition to evaluate. If it's true, then you can do a subset of operations. And if evaluates to false, you can do a different set of actions. We also have a loop collection, which is used for processing multiple records. And then we also have other things such as date and time helpers. If you're doing any date formatting or text formatting, we can all do that directly within the workflow. So in this case, I want to evaluate whether the subscription is greater than $500 in value. So I bring over the Boolean condition. And as you can see here, we have that branching functionality where if the conditions I set are true, it'll do these steps here. And if they're false, they'll do a different subset of tasks. So in this case, I want to evaluate if the dollar amount of that subscription is greater than 500. So again, I can go ahead and drag our connector snake into this previous step and then pick the values that are getting returned from Stripe. And so in this case, I want to reference this dollar amount field. And again, we want to check if it's greater than or equal to 500. So I can go ahead and switch this data type to a number and then pick 500. Now, another thing that's useful when building out flows is you want to make it very clear from a high level what's going on. So you can actually rename these steps as you're building so you can get a quick idea of what's going on at a high level. So here, I can rename this subscription created, or actually new subscription is a better term. For here, getting the subscription data. And then here, I'm checking if the amount is greater than 500 or greater than and equal to 500. Now, if that amount is greater than 500, Then I want to actually create a lead within Salesforce. So again, I can go ahead and drag over our Salesforce connector and then pick the operation that I'm trying to do. So in this case, I'm trying to create a new record. And for Salesforce, I actually do have an account, so I can pick that. And then I can actually, Trey will actually auto fill in this information of all the custom and standard objects that you have available within your Salesforce instance. So in this case, I can pick a lead because I want to create a new lead with this information. And then I can actually pass in the data fields that I want to set with this new lead. So in this case, I want to set the email address. And again, I drag over and reference that previous Stripe connector step. And as you can see here, email address. So actually with this subscription data, we actually don't have information on the actual customer. And so what we can do is actually drag over another Stripe connector and get the customer data. The customer data. And in this case, I, once again, choose the operation, get customer, and then for the ID, I again want to grab the customer for this particular subscription. And we have a field here that's customer. And then now that I have that particular customer data, I can reference the email of that customer. So again, here is that email field. And we now have a new lead within Salesforce. And you can even set custom text fields as well, where customer in Stripe amount greater than 500. And as you can see here, Trey's flexibility allows you to really pull in the information that you need for your particular workflow. So there's a ton of flexibility in what you can do. And as your use cases become more and more advanced, you can adapt these integrations as you go along. And so one case where I think this could be improved is now that we have the email address, we could use a contact enrichment service such as Clearbit, and again, drag this step into the screen, into the canvas, and then we can perform contact enrichment based on that email address that we have. And with that Clearbit information, we can also fill that in to the Salesforce lead so that our sales teams have rich, up-to-date information on a really good prospect. Another thing that I want to bring to light is this HTTP client, which is that universal connector that Kyle was talking about. And this is for, we have a rich set of services. As you can see here, there's a ton of different services that you can connect to. However, it doesn't contain every service in the world. And so if you do need to connect to a service that we don't currently have, you can actually use this HTTP client to set up the API request and access those services without actually having a connector there. So it really adds to the already flexibility of the platform.
Yeah, and kind of jumping in here, just from an account executive point of view, the thing that's really powerful about this workflow is you can really catch things that are important to you, either from like a sales cycle or with accounts that, pretty much once you have customers, they're signed up, you don't have too much data outside of like a customer success manager meeting with them pretty frequently. That account is growing or they're doing something different. And if you have have a nice self-serve channel set up like this where they can add seats or they can continue to grow their account, that's already a big win because you don't have to involve an account executive to grow revenue. But then two, if you start to see different things like with this specific flow, an interesting about Stripe is they don't allow you to pick specific fields to pull in from Stripe. It's just a bulk import of all of the different fields. So you have a lot of things at your disposal. And so, for example, with this, it would just spend over 500, but you can grab any of these meta fields that are important to you that you might recognize as something growing inside your account. And it really kind of helps surface those accounts that you should pay attention to. a lot of cool things that can come out of here from just growing that revenue side of the business. So it's kind of come to that point where we've gone through a quick demo of the platform and kind of showing you guys some of the specific logic, as well as kind of going through a sample. And just for anyone on the call who's brand new to Tray, looking to evaluate us, typically if you were looking to evaluate Stripe and Salesforce, we kind of take you through something like this in more of like a codev. So these would be connected to your platform. So we can show live data flow to kind of give you a test to see what it looks like. And we can go through all the different features and functionality. A full production workflow would have a few more steps in here because there's a lot more testing and like nuanced details between the different steps. So just one thing to kind of highlight typically how we operate. So if anyone on the line is interested in joining or starting a sales cycle, just for context there. At this time, we'll kind of switch over to questions. So if there's any questions that I see a few came in already, or if you have questions about what we've covered today, or just anything about the platform, feel free to type them in and we'll start answering those. So it looks like a question. So I would like to use my email as a trigger and import data to my application from an email attachment. Is this possible with Tray?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually one that's really popular with our customers where we have an email trigger here where we'll actually set up a unique email address that you can send an email to. And then you can access any information within that email, whether that's the message in the email, the subject, or any attachments here, as you can see. And so it's really useful with CSV processing because a lot of our customers will send a CSV file through email on a scheduled basis. And then that CSV data will be processed through Tray in a workflow.
And Andrew, this is actually a good bridge. Someone here was asking about showing more features about the CSV upload. So you want to kind of go right into that?
Yeah, we have a CSV. So in the use case that I was kind of describing, where processing a CSV file from an email, what this would typically look like is we have a CSV editor and then also a CSV reader. And really the main difference is that some of those CSV files can contain millions of records. So the CSV reader is more for that hyper load, huge data. But in this case, usually the CSV editor is fine. What we can actually do here is create the CSV from the file attachment from that email. So we have a file attachment given, and then we can actually process certain rows. And so in this example, you can add data to that CSV file, you can get data, you can really do any of your typical CSV operations. And so what I've seen with a lot of customers is that they want to go row by row through their CSV file and update or create new records within another system like their CRM. Another example that's not really CSV that I have here is a lot of our customers use Google G Suite. And what they'll do is you can actually keep a live like spreadsheet running. And so they'll export data from different services like their CRM or marketing tools, and then they'll add different rows to that Google Sheet. So it's really easy. And another feature that I didn't really go into before was our debug log, where when you're building out workflows, you want to be able to see the live data that's running through them. And so you can go in and click into each step and see what is actually getting returned by those API calls. And you can see what kind of data that you're actually processing.
Another question kind of coming in on the same topic is, can we use Tray to mass merge accounts in Salesforce? And for this example, we've identified which accounts to merge.
Merge accounts. Well, let's bring over our Salesforce connector and see what operations we have available. So I think the way I would approach merging accounts is you can find records that however you want to identify them. So that could be, in this case, let's say we're trying to merge lead records. You could perform like a search based on email address, being like, in this case, my email is andrewsteele@trade.io. And if this request returns multiple records, that means we have multiple leads under this email address. And so once we have that information available, we could either merge those records together by performing an update on one of the records and then deleting the other. That's probably how I would approach that.
Just kind of adding to that, just for clarification for the person who asked, it's you're talking about it's not as simple as just like straight merging, but like you'd be using our workflow to basically loop through all the records and then check to see if it exists already or if it doesn't, create a new one versus just update the contact. So it's not necessarily using the merge API operation, but you get to the same result by using our workflow automation.
Yeah, I think the really powerful thing there too, as well, is that if Salesforce does have a merge operation, then we can go ahead and develop that functionality and add and upgrade this connector to support that. Currently, I don't see that here, so it could exist. And if it does, we can absolutely add it. The thing here is more so if Salesforce actually doesn't allow that operation to occur through their API, Tray is flexible enough to allow you to build workaround solutions to accomplish the same functionality through different means.
We're just kind of getting a high level answer to a lot of these questions. Like I said, all these questions will be routed to your contact here at Trey so they can follow up with you to get more clarification and go deeper as well. One question coming in is, do we integrate with Dun and Bradstreet? And is this a current connector? So I don't believe so, but we're going to show you kind of where you search for connectors once you're in the platform is the top left over here. So it looks like we don't have this as a connector, but if this is a REST-based API, we can connect through the HTTP client that Andrew was showing. And that's something that, again, kind of like a follow-up with your team here at Trey, we can kind of dive in and show you how we can connect with that. One, we can do it live in a call. And then what's nice about it, if it's something that you would like to have developed, we can scope it out for you. Question coming in is like, can we do a quick overview of Zendesk and Infusionsoft connectivity? So this would be something we could kind of follow up on another call with. We actually have quite a few videos about Zendesk on YouTube because we did a lot of group demos with it when we first got it going, because Zendesk is just so simple to connect to. And Infusionsoft is another connector we have. So if there's specific questions coming from that individual, feel free to type them in and the person who will follow up with you can go into more details there. Oh, here's a good question. How would you incorporate field references in a string of text? So, for example, is coming in from an email, like Stripe subscription in the description. Do we have a helper for that, Andrew?
Yeah, so if I understand the question correctly, you're asking if you can incorporate data from previous connector set, but also input like other text within that.
Let me read it again. So, how would you incorporate field references in a string of text? So, i.e., what you did with Stripe subscription, like in description.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's say that for this example, you don't want this to say customer, you want to say the actual name of the actual customer. And so what this is dynamic. This dynamically changes based on who the actual subscription is, whereas this later part of the text is static. It always stays the same. And so what you can do is actually use this cool curly brace format where you can reference different fields in the previous connector steps and then also have them embedded with text. And so in this example, I want to reference, let's say, that trigger and do like the subject. So it looks like, let me just refresh my page because yeah. So instead of customer, I again do bracket steps, and then I can reference some of this Stripe data. So in this case, I can do email address in Stripe, account is greater than 500. So that's a good way to combine both information from previous connector steps while also having some structure to your text field that you're trying to set. Yep. So I see a question on Slack as well. And so that's a really great use case here too, where this new lead comes in. And let's say we also want to alert a Slack channel for our sales team. We can actually add that right in as well and configure a message to get sent to a particular channel or person. So in this example, I can send a message and then I can choose a channel to send this to. So integrations, and then I can just type a message, new hot lead, and then I can actually link to this actual record within Salesforce. So provide a hyperlink to this lead so that our sales team can easily go to this record within Salesforce from Slack.
I see a few questions coming in. We get these every group demo. People are asking kind of how we compare to different competitors, as well as just kind of some general pricing of our platform. These are the things that I usually kind of pass off to follow up when someone from our company follows up with you, or if you have someone you're already working with. Those are good questions. But just at a high level, Zapier, I think, is a really good platform. It's actually how a lot of people kind of get introduced to automation and integrations. And we're really different companies. So you think of Zapier, they're doing some really simple automation and they really don't cost that much. So I say most companies should have both of us, because think of something like Zapier can take advantage of, you want to take things from an email and put them into a spreadsheet, or you have a kind of like more trivial workflows you want to build and you want employees to be able to self-serve and do that. It's a great platform for those type of things. But when it starts to come into play where, like the example that we're talking today, your revenue going back into your CRM, this is a pretty business critical workflow. Something that, if you're paying a couple $100 a month for the subscription and it goes down and their support doesn't really get back to you right away, it could be a major impact to your business. And so for something like us, you're dealing with more of an enterprise solution where we're really going to take care of you. Things like that won't happen. If they do, you have people and they're going to work with you to kind of get it resolved. And then also just kind of like in the evaluation process, we're doing more complicated workflows where you can pull multiple different connectors, drive different logic, and do things that are a little bit more complex. And that's why we really don't go down like the template path too far. Andrew showed it a little bit at the beginning, but with every company, once you kind of go into, you go upstream in terms of the different software platforms they're using, it's so custom that templates don't really make sense anymore. And we just decided to make it really easy to build out these applications, these integrations, rather than go down the template path. So that's a big difference. And with pricing, that's definitely a conversation to have with your point of contact. We do have flexibility from what's on our pricing page, but it's a conversation to have with your point of contact. And just a follow up regarding like the Salesforce, it does have an API operation. This is just a good one to touch on. So we've talked about the universal connector a lot in today's session. So for example, if Andrew pulls the Salesforce connector out onto the screen, or he has one right here, what he can do is use the Salesforce connector, use the authentication that you already have tied to this application, and then also use the universal connector to basically reach any single API endpoint that's within Salesforce. And so what he would do is, you can kind of see he's doing it as I'm talking about it. He chooses the operation, get, post, delete. Then he goes and grabs the URL string from the Salesforce API page. So virtually we can connect to any single API within a service as long as we have the connector already built. And our universal connector is actually making some headways too. So the requirement of actually having a connector and the authentication will no longer be the prerequisite. So definitely there's fewer and fewer limitations as our product continues to move forward. Probably a good question to end on as well. So do you offer one-on-one training for Tray users, or is there a library of videos how two users can reference a couple things? If you're in the product as a customer, you will have chosen a support plan to be on, and there's a certain number of hours that come with that. So a resource like Andrew Steele can help you in live codevs like this type of interface where we're building one-on-one with you to teach you how to use the platform as well as kind of get your workflows up and running. Also, when you're a customer, depending on the support level, there's in-app chat as well. So you have access to a team of engineers who can kind of help you build. And in addition to the in-app chat, there's also a full all of our Help Center articles that just got launched a few months ago. So we're constantly adding articles for all the different connectors there. And then from the evaluation stage, if you're looking at us from a prospective point of view, we're going to do, like I said, kind of once we identify what you're looking to accomplish, we do these live codevs with you with your tools to show you how we use the platform and also get a sense for kind of how you're adopting the system as well. So we're going to make a recommendation that's right for you in terms of the number of support hours and the correct support plan to get you trained and up to speed. Really great session. Thanks for everyone who attended.